As a judge, I think probably the most distinguishing characteristic of Judge Haworth was his ability to know when to bring the hammer down hard and when not to.
He calls himself like a baseball umpire. He just calls balls and strikes, calls them as they are. Doesn't matter who the plaintiff is, the defendant is. He's just so fair-minded. And he has been consistently rated as among the highest, if not the highest, rated judge in our circuit, and was recognized as such by having served as the senior judge for a number of years.
Lee Eller Haworth was born September 10, 1945, in Sarasota, Florida.
A couple of weeks after they dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, I was born on Siesta Key. We had a little cottage out there that my family did, and my mother made it to Sarasota Memorial Hospital. In those days, it was a little bit of a hike. But yeah, I was born in Sarasota Memorial and spent first 5 years of life on Siesta Key.
He was the middle son of 3 children born to Dr. Chester and Leo Haworth, a brother Chester 1 year older, and a sister, Shom Drew, 5 years younger. His parents each brought their own interests to their children, providing them with a wide range of influences.
My mother, who was an art teacher and also a musician, having played with the West Coast Symphony, now known as the Sarasota Symphony, for about 25 years. So I learned the color wheel and the scales before I could actually learn the alphabet. And we would spend summers doing art projects and music.
While his mother provided the cultural influences, his father, a dentist by profession, was an avid outdoorsman. He introduced them to the outdoor life of Florida.
My father was a hunter, a fisherman. We would spend weekends in Okeechobee where we had a cabin. If I wasn't fishing, some weekends we would do hunting in Okeechobee, ducks. And we frequently went out here to what is the celery fields, now it's Fruitville Library, and shot doves.
Lee attended Southside Elementary School, where his cultural influences were further developed.
The school was an interesting situation there. They had a lot of things that they don't have now. For example, we had a full orchestra. One of the things that was very common for us was each year at Southside we would take a trip to the Ringling Art Museum. And we went so many years that I think I could probably give the tour myself. I knew the Rubens paintings, the Michelangelo statue history, a lot of the history of the museum itself, and it was really quite an experience for us. The other thing that we would do almost on an annual basis is we'd go to the Municipal Auditorium in Sarasota where they had musical concerts, orientation also, teaching children all about the different sections of the orchestra. We didn't realize it at the time, but we were privileged to have that experience.
He was a good student. However, his parents felt he could and should do better.
Grades were usually pretty good. When I didn't have one, typically it was math. I was pretty good in English. Language was always easy for me, and I loved to read. But whenever I would get a report card, typically it would say was not working up to his potential. And then my parents would encourage me to work to my potential.
In the 1950s, Sarasota was a quieter and more relaxed environment. Lee and his friends rode their bikes to school and felt safe wherever they went.
The city would close up on Wednesday afternoons. People would go to the beach or go fishing. I can remember going downtown, not seeing anybody on a Wednesday afternoon. Banks were even closed. We spent a lot of time outdoors. We played easily. Kids would play till 8 or 9 o'clock, no supervision. We didn't have helicopter parents. They pretty much relied upon us to come back whenever they needed to see us. My mother had like a dinner bell. She would ring and it would alert us that it was time for us to come in.
It was at Southside that Lee was introduced to law and politics.
He was captain of the safety patrol. That was his first foray into law enforcement, and used to be posted down there at the intersection of McClellan Parkway and Boyce and Osprey Avenue. But he also was class president of his 5th grade class, so that was his first foray into politics.
Lee attended Brookside Junior High School, where he played cello in the Brookside Junior High Orchestra and was a member of the West Coast Symphony Youth Orchestra.
My mother insisted that each of her children, my brother, older brother, and my sister, all of us played a musical instrument. So I started out on the piano and then gravitated to the cello. My brother played the violin and my sister played the harp. And we would have quartets with my mother playing, sometimes trios in our living room.
Lee attended Sarasota High School, where he found a great diversity among the students he would meet.
At high school, when I played football, it was unique because we had members of the circus that were high wire acts and the human cannonball. Their sons played on the football team. I also went to elementary school with the daughter of the ringmaster of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus.
Lee was a varsity swimmer, president of the Varsity S Club, and played first-string linebacker at 145 pounds on the football team.
He was a tackling machine. He was an excellent football player.
It was a great experience. Our senior year, we went 9-0 conference wins, went to the state finals, didn't win, but we showed pretty well.
Lee and his friends experienced the quiet Sarasota lifestyle. The old Lido Casino on Lido Beach was one of their favorite hangouts.
It had a ballroom, it had a snack bar. They had cabanas that you could go rent and change clothes and swim. It was really a center of entertainment and culture. I know my parents went to ballroom dances out there. They had sunset dances. And our swim team practiced at the Lido Casino pool, which is still there. Nothing else much is left, but the pool is still there.
Lee graduated from Sarasota High School in 1963. He had been accepted at the University of Virginia, University of Florida, and the University of Tennessee. His mother and father had graduated from Tennessee, and Lee chose that as his destination.
I went into pre-dent and stayed with it for a while until I ran into organic chemistry. And organic chemistry had other ideas for me. So then I changed to liberal arts and started doing a lot of English literature. Matter of fact, I thought I was going to be teaching Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe and those guys at the college level.
Lee's academic advisor suggested he consider a different direction.
My advisor, who happened to be a dean emeritus for the English department, talked to me about maybe you ought to think about going into law. And I had not really given it that much thought. And then I said, yeah, it sounds kind of interesting. And I've always had an interest in the law. And so I go home and I ask my father and talk to him about it. He says, that's a great idea. At
the University of Tennessee, Lee became involved in two organizations that would help shape his life: the ROTC program and the Alpha Tau Omega fraternity. His fraternity brothers embraced him and made the transition from Florida to Tennessee an easier and memorable experience. Lee graduated from the University of Tennessee in 1967 with majors in English and political science. He was a member of the Scabbard and Blade Honor Society, listed in Who's Who in American colleges and universities, and was a distinguished military graduate.
The Vietnam War was hot and heavy then. I was ROTC, and I was eligible to go, but the Army would defer me as long as I was in law school.
In 1970, Lee graduated from law school Juris Doctor as a second lieutenant.
Give you 90 days to find a unit or you go on active duty. And I found a reserve unit in that 90 days and stayed there until 1994. I was in the 199th Judge Advocate General Detachment. What we did was to teach the Geneva Conventions, targeting what targets are protected, how to treat civilians, how to treat prisoners of war. And I was in that same unit basically for 23, 24 years.
After his training, Lee returned to Sarasota to begin his career in law.
A friend of mine who is a practicing probate attorney allowed me to share space. He referred cases to me. So for about a year, I worked in general civil practice in litigation.
In early 1971, Lee learned of an opening at the Sarasota State Attorney's Office for prosecutors. He thought this would be a good opportunity to receive valuable trial experience. He interviewed with then State Attorney Frank Schaub and was hired.
You start out as a new lawyer in the State Attorney's Office. They give you a pretty heavy caseload. And I remember I tried my first 3 cases and lost them, and I thought this is the wrong job for me. But then I kind of got the hang of it and came up against some very skilled trial lawyers, learned a lot. You're in the courtroom an awful lot.
Lee would prove himself as an excellent trial lawyer and prosecutor, working his way up to chief prosecutor of the 12th Circuit.
And as the chief assistant, I got to pick my own cases, which was quite a pleasure. I tried several capital cases, death penalty cases, back before it got as complicated as it is now. And I remember one case in particular came in, it was a grand theft auto. Defendant's name was Perry Mason, and I just had to take that case. So that was a fun case.
In 1974, he joined the firm of Isfording, Payne, Corp, and Muirhead.
Well, I was quite fortunate because I don't think I could have had better preparation for the role of being a judge. I can say, looking back, there were very few cases that I saw as a judge that I did not handle at one time or another as an attorney. For example, I did condemnation cases representing Charlotte County and the city of Sarasota on some projects. I did banking, we represented a bank. So I did mortgage foreclosures and commercial litigation. I did personal injury, I did contract law, I did real estate condominium litigation, represented some condominium associations and homeowners associations. And so the great bulk of litigation that comes in front of a civil judge I'd had previously seen as an attorney.
In 1988, Lee was aware of an opening on the 12th Judicial Circuit Court for judge. He felt this was an opportunity where he could serve his community with his knowledge of the law.
You know, every time you run as an attorney, you have to talk to your partners and your family. You got to have their support. And they were always very supportive of it. They thought I could do a good job. And so without their support, I don't think I would have done it. But it's very important to have that solid family and business support of your shareholders in your firm. There were 3 of us running, and I was able to, I think I got 55 or 60% of the vote. Didn't have to have a runoff, which was fortunate because it was a lot of money to spend to run for office, particularly in 3 counties.
He was an Army JAG officer, and they went to a 1 or 2 week camp over in Germany. And it was going to be while the election results came rolling in. So he was over in Germany, sleeping in a barracks with about 75 other men. In the middle of the night, somebody comes over with a flashlight, shines it in his face and says, "You Haworth?" He said, "Yeah." "You're a judge." And that's the way he found out.
I'll tell you, I don't think I went back to sleep that night. Probably not the next night either. And I called home and heard all about the celebration. They had a nice celebration for me when I came back.
2 years into his position as a judge, Lee's life would take an unexpected turn when in August 1990, Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, ordered his army across the border into Kuwait. Then President George H. Walker Bush stated simply, "This will not stand." The U.S. formed a coalition with Western allies and neighboring Arab countries. President Bush issued an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein: leave Kuwait by January 15, 1991, or face a full attack by the multinational force. January 15 came and went, with no response from the Iraqis. The next night, coalition forces began the attack on Iraq. The war would become known as Desert Storm. Lee's National Guard unit was called up. He was among the first group of Allied soldiers to enter Kuwait City as it was being liberated. As Lieutenant Colonel Haworth, he headed the Department of the Army's War Crimes Documentation Center, investigating Iraqi war crimes.
We were given the responsibility of prosecuting war crimes of the Iraqi Republican Guard. They were basically criminals running a city, and they would commit rapes and tortures and murders of the Kuwaiti citizens. So our initial job was to target those individuals, identify them, and start preparing the process for what we thought was going to be a military tribunal. And then in the middle of probably early March, the mission was changed for political reasons to a documentation mission. The political decision was made that they did not want to have infidels trying Muslims. We had 3 facilities set up, one in Riyadh, one in Dhahran and one in Kuwait City. And between the three, we would gather the evidence. And then when the war concluded, I came back to the Pentagon and helped co-author the official war crimes report for the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
After his service, Lee returned to his position as judge of the 12th Circuit Court, where he focused on providing fair and just adjudication of the cases before him. It was not always an easy or pleasant duty.
Well, circuit judges have a number of divisions in which they can serve. We have 5 in our 12th Circuit. We have family division, we have felony division, we have civil division, we have probate/guardianship, and then we have dependency delinquency. And that latter one is the one that I saw the most difficult cases. Those are cases where you have abused or neglected children. Their parents have treated them terribly. The parents may be mentally ill or addicted, and they can't conquer their demons. So you have to find a place for these children, and there's certain very strict legal requirements before you can terminate parental rights, which in many cases is the best result for these children. And it's heartbreaking because it's the death penalty for that family. But it's very important to get these children into a nurturing environment where they're cared for and loved. And when you see children coming in who've been sexually abused or beaten or just mentally tormented by these parents, and you can do something positive to change their life, those were the most important cases for me. And of course I handled capital cases and all sorts of child custody issues, but the ones that touch you the most are the ones where the children, the innocents, have been hurt.
In 2007, he became Chief Judge of the 12th Judicial Circuit Court. During that time, the recession of 2007 struck. The court's foreclosure caseload soon went from about 900 to 8,000 in very short order.
It was a crisis, and Lee rose to a leadership role and immediately started requiring that banks meet with their borrowers to try to work out the differences in the loan, reevaluate the loan or reschedule the loan. And then he took it a step further. I think the program was called Stop the Slop, where a lot of the documents in the foreclosure package were incorrect, incomplete, and in some instances actually fraudulent. And so Lee got a lot of attorneys together to voluntarily review these documents for compliance with state law. And as a result of both of those, he was asked to become a part of the Florida Supreme Court Review Task Force on the foreclosure crisis in the state of Florida. They were remarkably successful here in Sarasota. The state was successful, and they actually became a model for the entire nation to follow. And that all started right here with Chief Judge Lee Haworth.
Lee helped start the Family Safety Alliance, a third-party watchdog program for child welfare, which helps link all aspects of the foster care system, making sure children receive the care and attention they deserve and protecting their rights.
He is the guide at the beginning of the ship, and he gets everybody on board, and he gets the court teams on board, he gets the attorneys on board. He gets everybody together and he gets it going, and he doesn't take no for an answer, ever, and he just says, let's find a way to do it. We'll find a way to do it. It has to happen. It's the best thing for kids.
During his tenure, he has been an ardent supporter of finding ways to help those who are struggling turn their lives around. From the pharmaceutical drug dilemma to juveniles making bad decisions.
I would say the most important impact he made, and I'm being selfish, is his work with our prescription drug problems that we had in 2009, 2010, 2011. I really don't think the community recognizes how engaged he was in that, and not from the standpoint of adjudicating people in front of him who are addicted to drugs, but taking part of the social aspect of the drug epidemic, and that his influence is huge in front of the Board of County Commissioners, the Criminal Justice Commission, and more importantly, his influence on the people who are addicted to the narcotics, who are committing crimes because they need to commit crimes to fuel their drug addiction. And that he realizes is that You're just not going to rush your way out of social issues and drug addiction.
He just had a knack of reading the person in front of him, and he knew that if they needed a hard hand to help them along, he would be very hard-handed with them. But oftentimes he would give them a break because he knew that that break would change their lives.
He was huge talking to me about our juveniles in our community, how arresting them really wasn't resolving some of their issues. A lot of their issues were family related, not having good families, not having parents, a father figure or a mother figure to be around. And so we looked at different programs and we started issuing juvenile citations for diversion rather than arresting them and fingerprinting them. And he was the impetus behind that, making me understand why it's better to do that than to try to arrest juveniles and the contact they have with law enforcement and the negative contact they have with law enforcement, that is better for them and their immaturity that they have. And more importantly, not having anybody there to help and guide them along, but to put them in diversion so that they can see life differently, other than the fact the cop shows up, puts handcuffs on them, fingerprints them, arrests them, and then they get put into some detention facility at 14, 15 years old. So he was huge impact on me to make me understand that that's more important than just locking them up.
He's firm when he needs to be firm with folks, and he doesn't mince words at all. And he's the first one to congratulate parents who work really hard to get their kids back or follow their case plans. He's just human. He's just so real that I could sit there and listen to him all day in court.
In August of 2015, he was honored to receive the first Florida Supreme Court Award for Judicial Excellence presented by the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court.
And I was listening to the names and thinking, boy, there's some good names on there. I think I knew all of them, and I said, they've done amazing work. And then I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden my name is called out as the winner, and I kind of did a double take because I had no expectation of receiving it. But I did, and I was called up to the stage and presented by the Chief Justice, Jorge Labarga, with the flag that had been flown over the Capitol, and they made a big deal out of it, and there's a lot of good press about it. But frankly, it was completely unexpected and very humbling that I could have been picked for that particular honor.
That same year, Judge Haworth retired from the 12th Circuit Judicial Court bench. It was not an option he preferred. However, Article 5 of the Florida Constitution requires that judges in Florida must retire at age 70.
It's an archaic provision. It goes back, I think, even before around the Depression time. You're really at the top of your game. I mean, 70 nowadays is not like it was 30 years ago. And we lose a lot of talent that way. I'm not just talking about myself, but I know an awful lot of good judges and justices that have had to retire at age 70 that we'd been better off if they stuck around.
Upon retirement from the bench, Lee approached Chief Judge Charles Williams and offered his services to review cases for the court. He became certified by the Florida Supreme Court as a senior judge and continues to provide his experience and expertise to the community.
I think Benjamin Franklin said something to the effect, it's better to have lived a useful life than to die a rich man. And I'm kind of working on that. I want to stay useful, and I want to keep the synapses in the brain firing. I volunteered to work as a senior judge, and I've gotten a number of great cases referred.
In his personal life, Lee was the father of 2 children, Elliot Haworth, born in 1979, and Katie, born in 1980. He also has a stepdaughter that he considers his daughter, Natasha Menke. Today, he dotes on his grandchildren.
It's nice being a grandparent. You can do a lot of things with them that you wouldn't do as a parent. But the proudest thing that I think I can say, and I think a lot of people feel this way, if your children have done well and your grandchildren are behaved and disciplined and obedient, polite, it's always been very important, I think you can claim to be a success.
We asked Judge Lee Haworth his advice for those who follow.
There's 3 things I think they can do and that we can do. One of them is you need to have a belief in something other than yourself. You have to have faith in something. It doesn't necessarily mean a belief in God. It means something more powerful than yourself, something outside of yourself. And if you do that, I think that'll help you have a good life. The second thing is you have to have family. That doesn't necessarily mean blood relatives. Sometimes those are the worst. But it means having people around you that you care about, that you want to hold close to you, and keep them in your lives and protect them and care for them. And then third, you have to watch out for yourself. You have to be fit, do everything you can to remain healthy, do the things that keep you healthy. And those three things, I think, will take you a long way and help you have a good life. Trying to teach that to people, none of those things cost money, but they're very important. And I think that the more that you invest in those three concepts, the better off you'll have a future. And I think that we're very fortunate. I've taught my children that. I think they're all adopting those principles. And so I think the future holds well for them, and hopefully it will for me too.